There comes a time in every person's life where silence is no longer a luxury but a necessity. The world, in its ever-accelerating pace, screams for your attention from every angle. Notifications call your name, opinions fill your screen, expectations press down upon your chest. The external noise is not just sound. It is a weight, a pull, a distraction that causes you to forget who you truly are beneath the noise. And yet, amidst this chaos, there is a voice that does not yell. It whispers. It does not force. It invites. That voice is the divine. And when it says, "Do not go outside on June 30, it does not speak in fear. It speaks in wisdom. Because there are days when the external world vibrates with disharmony. There are alignments that occur not only in the cosmos, but in the energy of humanity. A kind of collective turbulence. The sensitive ones can feel it before it arrives. The trees become still. The wind feels strange. The animals grow restless. And inside the soul, a gentle pressure builds, nudging you not outward, but inward. You see, silence is not about the absence of sound. It is about the presence of self. Silence is not an empty room. It is a full experience. And most people, they run from it. They cannot sit still for even a few minutes without reaching for a distraction. Because in silence, all that is unresolved within you begins to speak. The wounds you buried, the thoughts you ignored, the emotions you numbed, in silence they rise. And that is why people fear it. But the monks, the masters, the truly awakened, they seek it. Because they know that true transformation does not come in noise. It comes in stillness. Not in movement, but in meditation. Not in reaction, but in reflection. When God says, "Don't go outside," it is not to imprison you. It is to free you from what you cannot yet see. The real danger is not always a physical threat. It is energetic. It is spiritual. It is the loss of your center in a chaotic world. On June 30, something may stir in the atmosphere that is invisible to the eye but felt by the soul. A wave of collective fear, a burst of aggressive energy, a test of your alignment. The temptation will be to step outside, to act, to respond, to chase, to engage. But that is exactly why silence is the shield. When you are still, you do not add to the noise. When you are silent, you do not feed the chaos. When you are present, you become untouchable by the lower vibrations. Consider the bamboo in a storm. It does not resist. It bends, it bows, and it survives. Not by fighting the wind, but by aligning with its rhythm. That is the power of surrender. And surrender is found in silence. When the world is loud, be like the mountain, not because it is hard, but because it is unmoved. Be like the moon, not because it shines, but because it reflects without reacting. Be like the monk, not because he is perfect, but because he is intentional. He chooses silence because he knows that energy is precious. Every thought, every word, every action, it either brings you closer to clarity or further into confusion. And on certain days like June 30, the price of misalignment is high. You must begin to see silence as your sacred weapon, not as a retreat, but as a return to center, to breath, to the observer within. In the Shaolin tradition, silence is not passive. It is active stillness. A warrior sitting in meditation is not doing nothing. He is preparing. He is refining his focus, sharpening his awareness, calming his breath, so that when the time comes to act, he does so not from impulse, but from inner command. That is what the world lacks today, inner command. Most people are slaves to the noise around them. Their thoughts are not theirs. Their reactions are conditioned. Their goals are borrowed. Their stress is inherited. And all of this happens because they do not know how to be still. You must reclaim your power by reclaiming your attention. And attention, my friend, is mastered through silence. On June 30, let the world spin without you. Let others chase the wind. Let them argue, hustle, worry, fight, scroll, and strive. You do not need to follow. You are being called to rise above, not through superiority, but through sovereignty. To be sovereign is to be unmoved by what moves others. It is to feel but not be carried away, to see but not be swayed, to observe but not absorb. That is the fruit of silence. And silence is most powerful when the world is most loud. Many people wait for peace to find them, but peace is not something that arrives. It is something you cultivate. Just as a garden must be tended, so too must the inner space of your mind. And that garden grows in silence. Every moment you sit in stillness, you water that garden. Every time you resist the urge to react, you fertilize the soil. Every time you breathe and watch your thoughts without judgment, you pull out the weeds of ego, fear, and false identity. Oh, this is the real work, and it cannot be done when you are constantly outside your house, outside your body, outside your mind, chasing the next thing, the next distraction, the next noise. The greatest transformation comes not in movement, but in stillness. You do not find yourself by traveling the world. You find yourself by sitting still long enough to hear the whispers of your soul. And sometimes, life gives you a day that demands stillness, a day that insists you do not step outside, not because of danger, but because of invitation. A divine appointment with your own awareness. June 30 may be such a day where the veil is thin and the energy is dense, a day when being outside might dilute your spirit, a day when being inside may deepen your light. If you truly understood how sacred silence is, you would treat it like treasure. You would protect it the way a monk protects his morning meditation. You would schedule it the way people schedule meetings. You would defend it the way warriors defend their sacred grounds. Because in silence, you reconnect to your source. You unplug from the illusion and plug into the truth. You leave behind the mind and return to presence. And in presence, there is no fear. In presence, there is no confusion. In presence, there is only now. And now is always enough. Let June 30 be a reminder, not a restriction. Let it remind you that stillness is strength, that silence is wisdom, that protection sometimes looks like disconnection, that not every storm needs to be walked through, some must be waded out, that not every lesson is learned through action, some are received in stillness, that not every day is meant for movement, some are consecrated for meditation. Your task is not to question the instruction, but to honor it, not to resist the silence, but to embrace it, not to explain why the world is loud, but to refuse to let it enter your inner space. Because in that space your destiny is being formed. In that space your healing is taking place. In that space your guidance is unfolding. And none of it requires noise. None of it requires motion. All of it requires presence. All of it requires stillness. All of it requires you to understand silence is not the absence of life, it is the essence of it. And so, when God says, don't go outside, don't ask why, instead, bow your head and go inward. Sit with your breath, close your eyes, withdraw your senses, and there, in the sanctuary of silence, you will hear the only voice that matters. You will feel the only peace that lasts. You will find the only direction that cannot be shaken by the world. And you will understand, some days the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Not in laziness, but in sacred stillness. Not in fear, but in wisdom. Not because you are hiding, but because you are listening. That is the way of the warrior monk. That is the path of the awakened. That is the instruction of the divine. Listen to it, honor it, and protect your energy like it is sacred, because it is. There is a rhythm to life, one that most people have forgotten. A rhythm not found in clocks or calendars, but in energy, in frequency, in alignment. The earth has its breath, its tides, its shifts. The universe has its timing, its alignments, its sacred intervals. And the spirit too has its moments. Moments where stillness is more powerful than movement. Moments where being, not doing, holds the deeper truth. Yet in a world that glorifies speed, we are taught to override that rhythm. We are conditioned to chase, to act, to strive, to keep moving at all costs, even when our soul begs for stillness. But the masters know, true strength lies in recognizing when movement is no longer alignment, but resistance, when action becomes noise, when energy, instead of flowing outward, is asking to turn inward. That is why, when God says, "Don't go outside on June 30, it is not a punishment, it is preservation. It is preservation. It is the divine recognizing something that your conscious mind may not yet see. The energy of the day is not calling for action, it is calling for awareness. The energy of a day is invisible, but it is not silent. It speaks through feeling. You wake up and something feels off. You look outside and the air carries a weight. You notice your thoughts begin to swirl more easily. Your emotions rise without invitation. You may not have language for it, but your spirit knows. It senses that the energy today is dense, volatile, reactive, and if you move with that energy, it absorbs you. It affects your thinking, it distorts your clarity. It leads you down paths not meant for you. This is why sensitivity is power. The ability to feel, not just think. The ability to notice shifts in the unseen. Because those who are in tune do not just live by plans, they live by energy. They do not just follow calendars, they follow spirit. Most people ask, what should I do today? The wise ask, what is the energy today calling for? And sometimes the answer is simple, do not go outside, not because the world is dangerous, but because the alignment is internal. Because the sacred temple today is not a destination out there, but a sanctuary within. Because the world's current vibration could scatter what the soul is trying to gather. And gathering requires stillness, it requires retreat, it requires space. Nature teaches this in every season. The tree does not bloom all year long. It drops its leaves, not in defeat but in wisdom. The bear does not hunt all year long. It hibernates, not in laziness, but in preservation. The earth itself pauses. The moon goes dark. The ocean recedes. Why then do we think we must be in constant movement? Why do we fear rest, silence, retreat? Why do we resist the call to stop? It is because we are addicted to motion, addicted to productivity, addicted to doing, even when the doing disconnects us from ourselves. We have been taught that stopping is failure, that stillness is laziness, that inaction means defeat. But this is a misunderstanding of power. True power does not always rush. Sometimes it waits. True power does not always push. Sometimes it pulls inward. True power is not about how much you do, but how aligned your actions are with the energy of the moment. On certain days, the energy outside is too erratic, too unstable. It is as if the world is out of tune, and every step you take adds to the dissonance. You try to make progress, but doors close. You try to speak, but you're misunderstood. You try to act, but it leads to frustration. That is not failure, that is feedback. That is the universe saying, not today. That is life whispering, retreat, regroup, realign. And those who hear that whisper and obey, they do not fall behind. They move forward more swiftly when the path clears again. So on June 30, if the message is to stay within, trust that instruction. Trust that the energy of that day is not compatible with movement. Trust that something is being preserved in your stillness, that something is being rebalanced in your pause, that sometimes the protection you seek is not found in doing more, but in doing nothing at all. When a storm rages outside, the wise do not go out to prove their strength. They shelter, not out of fear, but out of intelligence. They understand that not all forces must be faced. Some must be respected from a distance. The same is true with energy. When the energetic atmosphere is unstable, It is not a time for confrontation. It is a time for conservation. To protect your thoughts, to guard your emotion, to observe but not absorb. You must begin to treat your energy like it is sacred. Because it is. Every action you take is an exchange of that energy. Every conversation, every interaction, every task. And on days like June 30, that energy must be preserved, not spent, not scattered, not compromised. Because what you may not realize is that stillness on such a day is not just about surviving the moment. It is about preparing for what comes next. It is about protecting the clarity that will guide your next step. It is about grounding yourself in a time when others are becoming lost in the chaos of outer motion. If you spend your energy recklessly on a day that is not meant for movement, you will arrive at the next opportunity depleted. You will be too distracted to notice the signs, too drained to seize the moment, too confused to recognize what you asked for standing right in front of you. That is why timing matters. This is not philosophy, this is practice. This is a discipline that must be trained like the body. To feel the shift of a day, to listen before you leap, to pause before you push, to ask, is my action in harmony with the vibration of this moment? If the answer is no, then do not act. If the answer is unclear, then wait. Stillness is not indecision, it is precision. It is patience. It is power that does not waste itself. Do you see now why the divine may say, do not go outside on this day? Because the energy of that day is not aligned with your purpose. Because the frequency outside your home is in conflict with the frequency within your soul. Because that day is not about expanding outward, but about gathering inward. And gathering inward is a sacred task. It is how you fortify your mind, how you cleanse your field, how you remember your truth. The greatest spiritual masters were not great because of how much they did, but because of how attuned they were to right timing. They moved only when the path was clear. They spoke only when the silence had served its purpose. They acted only when their energy was whole. And that wholeness came from retreat, from solitude, from knowing when not to go out. Movement is not bad, but movement without alignment is wasteful. And on certain days that waste becomes damage. The energy of June 30 may be a current that flows against your natural flow. And fighting that current will not lead to progress. It will lead to fatigue, to confusion, to disconnection. But if you honor the message, if you stay inside, not just physically but spiritually, you will preserve your alignment, you will sharpen your awareness, you will see what others miss. They will be outside, caught in the noise, seeking answers from the world. You will be inside, listening to the whisper within. And that whisper will guide you to clarity. It will show you that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause. Not because the world is winning, but because you are wise enough to wait. Because you understand that the journey is not only about steps taken, but steps not taken. That every pause is preparation, that every still moment is sacred. So when the divine says, don't go outside, hear it not as limitation, but as liberation. You are being freed from the illusion that you must always do, always act, always chase. You are being reminded that you are not a machine, you are a soul. And the soul, like the moon, has phases. Sometimes you shine, sometimes you reflect, sometimes you go dark to recharge your light. June 30 may be a dark moon day for the soul, a day not for action but for anchoring, not for chasing but for cherishing, not for expanding but for deepening. Honor that day by staying within, and you will find in that sacred pause more wisdom than 1,000 days of hurried motion. You will hear the voice that only speaks in stillness. You will receive the insight that only arrives in silence. You will align with the truth that cannot be found in the world, but only in the waiting. In the journey of life, obedience is often misunderstood. In a world that idolizes rebellion and the pursuit of individual will, the word obedience has come to feel heavy, like submission, like defeat. like the abandonment of personal power. But this is not true obedience. True obedience does not come from fear. It is not a posture of weakness. It is not blind. It is not mindless. True obedience is conscious. It is sacred. It is alignment with a higher intelligence. It is when the ego bows not to another man, but to the inner voice that comes from Source. And in this way, obedience is not weakness. It is the greatest strength. It is not slavery. It is spiritual maturity. When God says, "Do not go outside on June 30, it is not a command to be debated. It is an invitation to listen. It is a quiet instruction, not enforced through punishment, but spoken through vibration. Those who live only through logic will ask, why? But those who live through presence will say, I feel it. And feeling is a form of knowing deeper than thought. When your body says, something isn't right today, that is intelligence. When your breath shortens as you approach a decision, that is feedback. When your spirit urges you to pause, to stay, to not move, it is not weakness to obey. It is wisdom. Because obedience to that voice preserves your energy, your path, your purpose. The world teaches you to chase success, to push, to question every rule, to disregard every limit, to doubt anything you cannot prove with the five senses. But the sacred path, the warrior path, the awakened path, teaches you something else. It teaches you to listen beyond noise, to feel beyond evidence, to respond to energy, not just outcomes. Obedience in this sense becomes a sign of inner balance, because only the balanced can hear the voice of alignment. Only the silent can hear the whisper of truth. Only the present can know when the moment asks for stillness. When a martial artist enters the arena, his strength is not found in how many techniques he knows. It is found in how deeply he obeys the principles of flow, timing, and response. He does not act first. He watches, he waits, he respects the rhythm. And when he moves, it is with absolute clarity. That is what inner intelligence looks like. The capacity to wait when the world screams, go. The courage to stop when the body urges forward. The ability to discern between the noise of the mind and the guidance of the soul. This is obedience, not as submission to others, but as loyalty to truth. On June 30, there may be something unseen, a shift, a test, a disturbance, and those who rush into it out of arrogance, out of disbelief, out of impatience, they may find themselves lost, not because they are bad, but because they ignored the call to stop. They mistook stillness for weakness. They mistook obedience for fear. But the ones who listened, the ones who stayed inside not out of anxiety, but out of alignment, they will be protected because they are not governed by the outer world. They are guided by inner command. Ask yourself, how often do you override your own knowing? How often do you silence the quiet warning inside of you? How often have you looked back and said, I knew I shouldn't have done that? That knowing, that subtle hesitation, is inner intelligence. And every time you ignore it, you train yourself to live from the mind instead of the soul. You begin to follow patterns, not presence. And presence is where power lives. Obedience is not following what the world tells you. It is following what the moment demands from your soul. It is when your highest self speaks and you answer without needing proof. Obedience is the discipline to say no to your lower impulses, to delay gratification, to wait for divine timing, to bow your head not to man, but to mission, to hold your action until the energy aligns. That is strength. That is maturity. That is real freedom. The student who does not yet understand the teachings questions everything the master says. He wants reasons, he wants guarantees, he wants to know what happens if I disobey. But the student who has learned to trust, he does not need the whole map. He only needs the next step. If the step is stillness, he stays. If the step is silence, he listens. If the step is obedience, he bows, not from fear, but from honor. In the Shaolin Temple, obedience is one of the first lessons. not because the masters want to control, but because they know the mind must first learn to surrender before it can evolve. You cannot guide a student who always argues. You cannot protect someone who won't listen. You cannot elevate a soul who insists on moving when the path says stop. Obedience opens the door to wisdom. It prepares the vessel for refinement. This that sharpens the listening, and through that listening, the student transforms. You must begin to view obedience not as giving up your will, but as aligning it with the divine. Your will is strong, but not always accurate. Your desires are loud, but not always wise. Your emotions are real, but not always stable. And so there must be something higher, a compass that guides you not by logic, but by truth. That compass is your spirit, and the way your spirit speaks is through subtle knowing, through inner resistance, through quiet urging. And when you obey that compass, you move with grace. You walk into the right moments. You avoid unnecessary suffering. You act not because you want to, but because it is time. Obedience protects you from pride. Pride says, I know best. Obedience says, I'm willing to listen. Pride rushes, obedience watches. Pride demands results. Obedience waits for timing. And the more you obey that higher instruction, the more you are entrusted with. Life begins to move with you. Things begin to open, the right people appear, the wrong energies fall away. Not because you forced anything, but because you were in tune. You obeyed, and the one who obeys the divine order becomes one with the divine rhythm. There is nothing weak about obedience. It is easy to do whatever you feel. It is easy to follow your habits, but to stop and listen, to say no to action when every part of you wants to act, that is strength. To walk away from something that looks good but feels wrong, that is power. To stay inside when the world moves outside, that is sovereignty. Not everyone can do this, not everyone will. That is why most people struggle. They are always doing, always acting, always forcing, but the master acts only when it is time. And that timing is only revealed through obedience. Let this truth settle deep inside you. The one who listens moves faster than the one who pushes. The one who trusts reaches further than the one who plans. The one who obeys rises higher than the one who resists. Because obedience is flow, and flow is alignment, and alignment is destiny realized. Not through force, but through surrender. When the instruction comes, do not go outside on June 30. Hear it with your inner ear. Do not ask the world for confirmation. Do not seek validation from those who cannot feel what you feel. Sit quietly, feel the vibration of the day, feel the frequency of your own body. If it pulls you inward, obey. If it tells you to wait, obey. If it invites you to listen, obey. In that obedience, you will be protected. In that obedience, you will be guided. In that obedience, you will be elevated, not by the world, but by the wisdom that lives within you.